In today's video, we're reviewing all the latest NHL trade talk that mostly came from Saturday headlines on Hockey Night in Canada, looking at teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll jump into the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're looking at some trade rumors, looking at three teams, two of which are Canadian in the North Division, and of course the Pittsburgh Penguins here as well. And we'll kick things off with them. Now, of course, as we know, the Penguins are a team led by GM Jim Rutherford that are not afraid to be aggressive and not very patient as well. And they're a team right now that is looking for help on the blue line after encountering multiple injuries back there. They're going to be without a few blue liners for a little while, and Rutherford is looking to add some additional depth. Now, I don't think he's going to be overly picky. There hasn't been much on waivers lately, so he's probably looking around the league, looking at defensemen, or might be number 6, 7, 8 guys on a lot of teams that might not be getting as much playing time, something he can probably get for a fairly cheap price, maybe a mid to late round draft pick or a fringe prospect or something to that effect. I don't think they're looking to spend a whole lot, and I don't think they're looking to really make a major big splash here. It's nobody that would be like a top 4 guy or anything of that nature, somebody who can come in and fill in kind of like as a third pair type of defenseman. Like one name that comes to mind, for example, would be Carson Soucy in Minnesota. He's a guy that's been lacking playing time. And another guy that we're going to talk about further here as well would be like Victor Mete in Montreal. Guys like that are, they have enough NHL experience that they can be a useful defenseman, but they're just not getting that enough playing time to kind of justify teams keeping them. Of course, though, at the same time, because of the condensed schedule and the way the playoffs are going to work here, teams are obviously going to want to be hanging on to some guys, and where they can have the expanded rosters with the taxi squad. Clearly, teams usually, to have a deep playoff run and be successful, you do usually need to go through a lot of defensemen before you reach the finish line. So nothing that's going to be too imminent here, but don't be surprised if you see the Penguins make a move here in the next little while to pick up a defender. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised they didn't jump at the opportunity when Calgary had Oliver Shillington on waivers not long ago. I really thought that would be a player that would get claimed in Pittsburgh. At that point, they didn't have quite as many injuries, but still, I'm really surprised a guy like that slipped through the cracks. So we'll see if the Penguins kind of sniff around and find themselves some depth here in the short term. Now, of course, we want to look at Toronto and Montreal. We'll start things off with the Maple Leafs. And as discussed on Hockey Night in Canada's Saturday headlines with Chris Johnston and Elliot Friedman, kind of came as a little bit of a surprise in a way that the Toronto Maple Leafs are apparently scouring the market, looking to upgrade their depth forward positions. Now, this is largely due to the fact that they've kind of been bitten by the injury bug lately. Nick Robertson and Joe Thornton are both going to be out for an extended time. Both are going to miss probably over a month, like 4 or 5 weeks, something around there. They're both on long-term injury reserve, which is a minimum of a 28-day absence. So, we're looking at least that amount of time for them to get back with their team. That's if everything goes well with their recoveries. Of course, they do have a lot of depth. I know I heard a lot of media and a lot of ones that cover the Leafs especially going on about how deep the Leafs were heading into the season at the forward position. It seems like they have an abundance of guys that have at least a limited amount of NHL experience, besides the guys that are, like looking at the ones in the bottom 6 here that are kind of rotating in and out or on the taxi squad. You've got Jason Spezza, you've got Adam Brooks, you've got Pierre Engvall, you've got Travis Boyd, you've got Joey Anderson as well. So, obviously with the guys that they've acquired throughout the offseason, and ones that they've already kind of had it within, that they do have a lot there. So they're not necessarily forced to go. But my gut reaction from the notice from Friedman here on headlines is more so that some of those guys might not really be producing to the point that they would like. So they're not really overly as impressed, and maybe they're looking for ways to upgrade. Now, of course, long term, though, that could cause more complications salary cap-wise. So again, I don't think we're going to see a situation here where Toronto goes out and does anything too substantial. It'd have to be somebody who could probably kind of go up and down your lineup, somebody who could be very versatile in that sense, somebody who can play third or fourth line minutes, but when there is an injury like they have now, can jump up to second line minutes. Even if somebody that could be possibly waivers exempt would be even better for them, since they wouldn't have to put them through waivers later on to go back and forth between the taxi squad. But clearly Kyle Dubas is not as happy with the depth that the Leafs have built up here with some of those forwards that they have. I mean, I know Spets has been in and out, which is not a big shocker anyway, but I thought Brooks and Boyd were okay when they played. The last game we saw Engvall appear in was decent. Like I said, I know somebody commented and said he looked like a guy playing trying to keep his job, and really that's what he should be doing. He was given a decent contract extension and then really tailed off, so obviously better play from him would be helpful as well. I'm not completely convinced that we're going to see anything really much on this, or if we do, it's going to be minor, but the Leafs have a lot of guys there. It's complicated for them to make a move. One of those guys would have to be moved out and swapped for another one. That's what my prediction would be if the kind of deal that Friedman's talking about were to happen. We'd see them trade a guy, whether it be Anderson or Boyd or one of those depth forwards for another guy coming in. Now, it's probably not going to be Anderson. He's still young enough that they're likely going to hang on to him. But I could see a possibility where a guy like Engvall gets moved, or maybe a Boyd. Brooks, too, probably less likely in his case. I thought he had a good game the other night. So we'll see what the Maple Leafs do. I won't be shocked if things stay quiet, though. Eventually here in a month or so, guys like Thornton and Robertson will be back, and then they'd have even more issues. But they can find a way to upgrade those depth pieces. Apparently, according to Friedman, they're looking into it. Of course, on headlines, they talked a fair bit about the Montreal Canadiens as well. Of course, we have a guy like Victor Mete, according to Friedman, is kind of being watched closely by other NHL teams. Now, he doesn't go on to indicate here that Marc Bergevin is shopping him or looking to move him, but it is inevitable here that at some point he very well could become a trade piece, given the fact that he can't get into the lineup. I know that they've talked a bit about the fact about him even playing forward a bit, but still, they've got enough depth on defense that a guy like him who's still young and still kind of deserves an opportunity here can't get the playing time. So other teams are kind of sniffing around, seeing what they can get for Victor Mete. Of course, Montreal, as we've seen, the start of the year has been very strong. They're very deep. They've got some good guys that are veterans and producing for them coming in off the taxi squad as well. Their defense has been pretty solid. They've got a couple goalies. They don't really need a whole lot in return. To me, if they were to move a guy like Mete, they'd probably get as high as a draft pick as they could. Maybe another prospect, difficult to say, but there's not a lot there that they need. Now, of course, Montreal might not feel pressured to make this kind of move, of course, given the fact that, like I said about the Penguins and other teams, they do need a lot of defensemen for a hopeful long playoff run. The way Montreal's playing at this point, I can feel very comfortable saying I expect them to be a playoff team, and they would have a decent shot at going on a bit of a run. I think it's a remote possibility here. Montreal could go far this year. They look really, really good so far. And I know it's early, but the way they look now, that would be an easy prediction to make. So given that, they're going to need possibly a guy like Mete later on. So I don't think we're going to see them rush a deal here by any means, unless they get a call and Bergevin just can't pass it up. But when you have guys playing ahead of them, like Petrie and Weber, you've got Sherratt, you've got Kulak, you've got Romanov, you've got Edmondson back there. It's hard for him to get into the lineup at all, because it's hard to justify taking somebody else out when they're all producing, playing well. And you've also got guys like Cale Fleury and Ouellette, and even Ouellette played a fair bit in return to play. They lost Juleson to waivers, so they're down one guy there, but still, they have a lot of options there, so they can afford to part with somebody, but it's just going to depend. Now, of course, we want to touch on Philip Deneau as well. Now, this information didn't come from headlines, it came from other articles, but still, as we kind of touched on a bit the other day, we got word that Philip Deneau turned down a contract extension. It's reported to be about 6 years and $30 million. So that puts him at an average annual value of $5 million per season. Now, we also know that Montreal was in quite heavily on Pierre-Luc Dubois. Were not successful in landing that trade. I've seen a lot of Habs fans actually were happy about that, given the fact that they're quite happy with where the team is, where the other young centers are developing. They didn't want to mess too much with the chemistry. At the same time, though, I think it could have been a great addition for the right price, right deal. We saw Winnipeg give up quite a lot, and it would have likely started with Nick Suzuki if they would have had any chance to land a deal. And to me, that just didn't make sense. The way Suzuki's playing, he's not that far off from what you get in Dubois. And to me, it would be more of a lateral move. He's just slightly older, slightly more experienced, but really, you've got Suzuki for this year and next on an ELC. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, he's going to be as good as Dubois longer term. At least it looks that way right now. So from Bergevin's perspective, I think he did the right thing with not overpaying like we saw Winnipeg do, giving up two disgruntled RFAs, but are still really good players for Dubois in a third-round pick. But as we know, though, there was a lot of talk when I talked about the Habs kind of going after him. I felt a guy like Danault would have to be included because it's going to be difficult, given all the contracts they've done, to afford everybody here that's going to be coming up on a pending unrestricted free agent contract. You have Danault entering his last year on his contract. You've also got Thomas Tatar, who's a pending UFA as well. Tatar has been a very productive player for them since he's arrived in that trade from Vegas. That was a steal of a trade for Pacioretty. That's worked out wonderfully between Tatar and Suzuki coming over for Pacioretty, and that trade was awesome. They've been incredibly productive. So at the end of the day, I would say that they're probably interested in keeping everybody, but they're just not going to be able to. After signing Josh Anderson to a mega 7-year deal, you get Toffoli on a fairly long-term contract. You already re-up Brendan Gallagher on a longer-term contract. You signed Petrie for a few more years. You got Weber still a longer stretch. You got Price a longer stretch. You extended Allen a couple more years. A bit of a reduced rate, but still, you got a lot of money tied up in goaltending in the next few years as well. Some moves were done for expansion draft purposes, and some are not. It's players they want to keep. So at the end of the day here, they have a lot of money tied up for next year and beyond. So getting their entry-level contract players like Suzuki and Konkaniemi and Romanov in the next 2 or 3 years extended and raises granted for them are going to be challenging if you also extend guys like Thomas Tatar as well as Philip Danault. As like I said, I don't think they have any reason to want to ship them out. It's just going to prove difficult, and it's going to be a challenge to do. Now, we do have new information on Danault suggesting that the Montreal Canadiens are still very interested in re-signing him, obviously, until they get probably Kotkaniemi especially further along in his development. I think they would really like to keep him around. And that longer-term contract, to me, if he doesn't accept that the way it is, I don't see him getting more money on the open market, given the fact of where everything is with the lost revenue. And we saw what like Mike Hoffman, for example, signed for. Guys are not getting the money that they thought they would get. So it's difficult right now. So, the reports are that Montreal would be willing to raise that value a little bit. They'll tinker with the offer, maybe going up a couple $100,000. So we could see it maybe go from 5, 5.1, 5.2, 5.25. I don't see them really at this point wanting to pay any more than that. And really, for a guy like Danault, who could be a number 2 center, but could end up being number 3 if Kotkaniemi continues to develop the way he is, it's going to prove to be very difficult and put them in a bit of a complicated salary cap situation. Given where Kotkaniemi is, we'll see how much he kind of continues to develop this year. But he's going to need a new contract before Suzuki, and he's going to be like the first one of the young guys right now that's going to be due after this year. I think they could probably get him on a decent bridge without, breaking the bank. So I don't think he's going to cost too much for the next couple of years. But after that, if he continues progressing, he will. Suzuki, though, I think is on pace to come under his ELC and get a much bigger contract. So it's going to complicate things, and I just don't see how they can keep Danault and Tatar in the mix. Somebody's got to go. Something's got to give here. And if they can't come to terms with Danault, unfortunately, I do see a scenario where he'll either be a trade piece while they still hold his contract rights, or they're going to end up losing him through free agency. But something does have to give. I mean, Danault is a great two-way center. He doesn't score a lot. He gets a fair bit of assists. A decent playmaker. Obviously played with a lot of good wingers in the last number of years, which has helped his cause as well. But still, I think if Montreal can come to terms with him around a $5 million contract, is that something as a Habs fan you're happy with? If you can only pick between Danault and Tatar to keep around in the picture here based on all the other money that's spent, what do you have to pick here longer term? I mean, it's going to be tough to keep everybody in the mix. It's kind of a victim of your own success. And then let's hope that while they have everybody this year, they can make a good run at it, because it could get more complicated in the next few years without having salary cap raises to look forward to kind of, level everything out. So let me know your thoughts on that down below, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.